There's also, Terry Gorski's come up with the concept of post-acute withdrawal, may last for months or years. And then there's the psychological withdrawal when the anger starts coming up, because food addicts have a way of saying they eat over their feelings or eat to stuff them. And when those start coming up in recovery and abstinence, they have to be dealt with. And I think they have to be dealt with immediately. Denial is part of the disease, and so is delusion. In the early stage, people are able to deny that they have an addiction because there are no apparent problems. And I just saw an indication of that. In fact, kind of telling tale out of school, but I heard an alcoholic say recently that he lived in the mountains, the Catskill Mountains, and he and his friends were all hard drinkers. And they had a good time, and he didn't suffer any consequences. And then he moved to Florida, and then he became an alcoholic because he started to suffer consequences of his drinking. Well, really, what he was seeing was the progression. He didn't become an alcoholic in Florida. I think he was an alcoholic back there in the Catskills. But what he saw was when we start to recognize that, we think that's when we become. And I think that's really usually the middle stage. In middle stage, addicted persons are able to deny the addiction because they do not always associate their problems with eating. So I have gallbladder disease. That doesn't have anything to do with that fat diet that I'm eating. And sadly, people want to hang on to their eating, so they don't want to see it as the problem. In the chronic stage, denial results from impaired thinking and distorted judgment. I want to just move into, I'm not sure what time I'm supposed to wrap up now. Okay, so let's just talk about recovery as a process and not an event. So I've talked a little bit about recovery as I've talked about the disease process, and I believe that education about addiction is essential. Ignorance of the disease process and the recovery process does not earn a dispensation from negative consequences. That's why we're here, because we want to know exactly what's going on. And I think that's exactly what this weekend is about. Good information. That's what my whole life is about. Collecting and disseminating good information about the disease of addiction. So I guess we're not going to get into too much about recovery, but there's only one other thing, and we're certainly not going to talk about that relapse. But what we are going to talk about is, oh dear, I didn't know I was doing that, but let me just bring up the slideshow again so you don't have to look at that. So the last thing I really want to say about recovery is that it's out there, it's possible. We have people in this room with 10 years of clean abstinence. We have people in this room who have lost 200 pounds, 100 pounds. We have people in this room with 7 years of clean, continuous abstinence. And we're going to hear them next. We're going to hear recovering people in the next hour share their recovery strength and hope with us. And it's possible. It can be done. So thank you all very much. Three questions? Okay, we're going to take time for a few questions. Maybe we don't, okay.
Kay, I'm a big fan of yours, and I really applaud all the work that you're doing. I have a question, which is, have you considered that there's a fourth group? I mean, your theory is fascinating, that they're users, abusers, and addicts, but I know in the people that I've worked with, a lot of them, and also myself, that I think at one point some of these people have been addicts, and then after they've gotten off sugar, or they've worked on themselves or developed other ways to create positive feedback for themselves, or they've found a way to, exercise instead of eat sweets, that they've then flipped over to being a user. So I'm just curious if you think there's a group, perhaps maybe a combination between an abuser and a user. I don't know, because your theories are sound, but I know a lot of people who don't fit into all three of those groups.
Yeah, we'd have to test their DNA, wouldn't we? Because if they were real food addicts and that happened, we'd say they were an addict. If they didn't have genetic predisposition, we'd say they were an abuser.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I know a lot of people who they went through the withdrawal symptoms, and then, they began to work on themselves. They, got spirituality, started meditating, started working out more.
And safely ate sugar again.
They either stayed away from it, or perhaps they safely ate a tiny bit, or, they had more control over it. And I guess that's the challenge I know that I've had. Like, I know that I was an addict. There's no question about it. I had severe withdrawal symptoms, and I totally stayed away from sugar for about 6 months. And then something happened, and at one point, I was able to have a bite or two. I was able to stop. I didn't fall down. And a lot of people that I've worked with are the same way.
I don't know.
So I was just curious if you...
You have to name the classification. Because,
I don't know.
Because we just need to check your DNA, I think, to see if there's genetic predisposition. And, of course, there's more than one gene associated with addiction, too. So I don't know. Let's hatch a plot and figure a name for it.
But, what you've done is amazing. Anyhow. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for what you've done as well. Have any other questions? Okay, thank you, everybody. Let's listen to the recovering people.